Welcome back. Today, I want to talk about radical responsibility. Because the truth is, there are things that happen to you that should never have happened. Pain, rejection, trauma, abuse, betrayal. And none of it was your fault. What if the thing that is keeping you trapped is not what happened to you, but the story you keep telling yourself about it? What if your suffering is no longer coming from the original wound, but from the identity you built around the wound? Because listen to me carefully. There are people walking around this world carrying pain from 20 years ago like it happened this morning. Still arguing with ghosts, still trying to prove something to people who are no longer there. Still letting a moment from childhood decide how they love, how they lead, how they dream, how they speak, and how they show up in life. And maybe that's you. It was definitely me for a lot of years. Maybe you learn to believe I'm not enough. I'll never be loved. I'll always get abandoned. People can't be trusted. I'm broken. I'm too damaged. I'll never recover. But hear me. Those are not facts. They're stories. And stories repeated long enough start to become identities. Now, the truth is, your past may explain you, but it does not have to define you. Now, listen carefully because this part matters deeply. Radical responsibility does not mean you deserve what happened. It does not mean the abuse was okay. It does not mean the trauma was fair. And it does not make your pain invalid. No, not at all. That's not the point. There are wounds people carry that should have never been inflicted. But freedom begins when you stop giving the past permission to keep deciding your future. Because at some point, you have to stop reliving the old injury and start rebuilding the person. And today, that's where we're going. Here's a relatable struggle. You know what's exhausting? Living your entire life trying to protect yourself from something that already happened. Think about it. Some people are no longer living, they're defending. Defending against rejection, defending against failure, defending against vulnerability, and defending against being hurt again and again. And the tragedy is, the defense mechanism that once protected you eventually becomes the prison that limits you. The survival version of you is not the fullest version of you. Maybe as a child, you learn stay quiet, don't trust people, don't ask for help, don't talk too much, don't be weak, don't fail, don't need anyone, big boys don't cry, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. And those patterns made sense then. But now, all these patterns, suppress your emotions, don't ask for help, they're destroying your relationships. They're destroying your peace. They're destroying your confidence and destroying your ability to really feel alive. Yeah. I think about this story often. When I was a young person, when I realized life's not fair. And it was like one night probably a Friday night. Me and my two brothers are watching TV downstairs. My two brothers start getting into a fight. And I'm trying to stop them because I know exactly what's going to happen. That if my dad hears that, he's going to come down and he's going to send everybody to bed. So I couldn't stop it. So I ran up to go to the washroom. And when I came out of the washroom, he's yelling at my brothers to go to bed. And I go down and I come out of the bathroom and I go downstairs to go watch TV again. He says, "You go to bed too." And I'm like, "I didn't do anything." He says, "I don't care. You go to bed." I'm like, "It's not fair." And he said, "The world's not fair. Get used to it." And I spent a life of like believing the world's not fair. The truth is, I've figured out something really important about the world's not fair. It isn't. And depending on how you look at it, it can be a good thing. I was born in a country where there's enough food, where there's enough work, where we have shelter. I was born in a time when, there's no wars that are affecting me personally. Yeah, life's not fair. I'm part of the 1% of the world who has more than enough. That's not fair. You know, trauma, it's not just an event. Trauma has a lot to do about the meaning we attach to the event or the story about the event. That's how it carries forward. Two people can go through the similar pain and create a completely different identity from it. One says this broke me. Another says this awakened me. One says I'll never trust again. The other says I will learn discernment without closing my heart. One becomes bitter and one becomes wiser. And the difference is the story. And now I know some people will hear this and immediately resist it. Because part of us wants to say, but you don't understand what happened to me. And maybe I don't fully understand your pain, but I know this. If you continue to rehearse that pain, if you continue to reinforce the identity you connected to that pain, then they say neurons that fire together, wire together. You will create an identity of who you are. And every time you say, I'm broken, I'm damaged, I'm a victim, I'll never recover, and you strengthen that neural pathway and you train your nervous system to live there. And eventually the mind stops asking, is this true? It starts assuming this is who I am. I heard this story on a podcast. They were talking about, there was this massive study done, and they said there were two people that answered the same question. They came from two completely different walks of life, but they answered the question the same. And one of them was the CEO of the biggest company in North America, and the other one was a person, an alcoholic on Skid Row. And the question was, what do you attribute your success or your downfall in life to? And they both said, my parents were alcoholics. Two of them had a different story. It's just like if you meet a really amazing, compassionate human being, and if you really get to know them, you'll find that somewhere through their life, they went through some incredible pain, but they didn't identify the pain as a victim, right? They understood what it felt like to hurt. And then they chose to spend their rest of their life helping people through that. If your brain wires together and you start assuming this is who I am, that's what you get. But what if it isn't? What if the story is not the truth? What if it's just the most repeated sentence in your head? Well, let's talk about a reframe, a mindset shift. I need you to hear this next part deeply. You are not responsible for being wounded, but you are responsible for healing that wound. You ever heard the quote, "No one's coming to save you, except with the possibility of yourself, but it's going to take work." And some people don't like hearing that you're responsible for the healing because healing feels unfair. Why should I have to heal from something someone else did? What a questioning. Because your freedom matters more than the fairness argument. You can be right about your pain and still remain trapped by it. At some point, you must decide, do I want justice more than peace? Do I want revenge more than freedom? Do I want to keep proving how hurt I was or finally become who I could be? You know, I remember when I was a child, like my first memory, just a little munchkin, obviously in a crib, in a dark room. My mom was sleeping on the couch and the blinds are closed, but there's a little bit of light trapping through. And there's dust particles sparkling in the air. And I really wanted attention, but something in the little me knew that I have to ask for it. It's not real. And something in me decided that I wasn't important enough. I'm not important. So I decided I'll be okay being alone. And it's funny, my mom used to tell me that when I was a little guy, I never cried. Not when I was hungry, not when anything. She'd forget about me. I was the best baby. But I was living a narrative that I'm not important enough. And the only way to deal with that is to be alone. And I spent a lot of my life alone. There's been a few amazing people along the way that are so tenacious that they wouldn't give up on me. And after a while, I realized that the truth is that's just a story. It's not a truth. And I decided that, I could actually have people in my life go against that nature, especially the people that were so amazing. And so my nature is to be alone, trapped in that narrative, which doesn't seem to be able to shift. But I can choose to have people, especially the people that are so important to me, that I'll go against my nature to have them. Here's the truth nobody ever tells you. Sometimes the hardest addiction to break is the emotional attachment to your identity as a wounded person. Because if you stop being the victim, then who are you? If you stop blaming the past, then what now? Well, now you have to risk. Now you have to grow. Now you have to become accountable. And now you have to face uncertainty. And that's terrifying because blame can feel safer than responsibility. Blame says it's not my fault. Responsibility says, maybe it's not my fault, but my life is still my responsibility. And I am the one who carried that story from that moment of trauma into today. And that's power. Real power, not fake motivational nonsense. Real power is saying, yes, I was hurt. Yes, I was betrayed. And yes, I went through hell. But I refuse to let this pain become my permanent identity. I choose to take responsibility for the story that I told myself over and over again. And I choose to not tell that story anymore. But listen carefully. The human mind is a meaning-making machine, constantly interpreting life. A breakup becomes I'm not lovable. A failure becomes I'm not capable. A rejection becomes I'm not good enough. But those are they're interpretations. They're not the truth. The truth is pain is inevitable, but identity is constructed. And if identity was constructed, it can be deconstructed and reconstructed. So I want to give you some tools. And this is just one thought of a tool. And you can take it on if you want, or you can just listen, hear it out, and maybe look at it later. Basically, I want to give you a framework. And not just inspiration, but because transformation takes practice. Your first step is going to be separate fact from your story. Actually, ask yourself, what actually happened? X, Y. I was hurt by someone. And then what meaning did I attach to that? For example, someone left. Story, I'm unlovable. Fact, you failed. Story, I'll never succeed. Fact, someone hurt you. Story, I'll never be safe again. Can you see the difference? Facts are events. Facts are what happened. Stories are interpretation of that event. What did we make it mean? And you can change your interpretation. This is what reframing is, in a nutshell. Reframing. Step 2. You can identify the hidden payoff. Like every pattern serves or survives because it serves some, even suffering. Maybe staying hurt protects you from ever being vulnerable. Like if you're hurt, you've been hurt over and over again, you're so hurt that you never have to try again. So you never have to be vulnerable. Maybe staying angry protects you from grief, right? Mad is sad's bodyguard. If you're so mad your whole life, then you never have to feel the pain. And maybe staying small protects you from ever failing. Think about it. If you never try, you'll never fail. But then what kind of life would that be? Ask yourself honestly, what is this story protecting me from? Because awareness creates choice. And step 3, rewrite the meaning. Not denying the pain. Like we feel what we feel and we feel our way all the way through it because the freedom's in the feeling. So you don't deny the pain you went through, but you create a new relationship to it. Instead of this ruined me, try this shaped me. Instead of I'm broken, try I'm building. Instead of I lost everything, I'm learning who I really am. Healing is not erasing the past. Healing is changing your relationship with it. It's funny. Sometimes I run into 2 different people that have gone through a very similar thing, like athletes. One that's both that have been injured over and over again. And one of them will be like, I got to be so careful. I'm fragile. I could break at any time. And that's how they live their life. And the other one doesn't look at how many times they've been injured. You're like, I'm so amazed at my body because I've come back every time and always got faster. Step 4, you got to stop rehearsing the old identity. Your mind believes what you repeat. So stop introducing yourself internally as a broken version of yourself. Basically, you got to fight that internal dialogue. You got to start being your inner advocate. And when it says something, you correct it in your head. Stop worshiping your wounds. Stop building a home inside your suffering, because eventually the cage door opens, but you still won't leave because it's comfortable. Step 5, take one brave action, not 10, one. One conversation, one boundary, one therapy session, one journal entry, one workout, one honest moment, one step towards life again. Because action interrupts identity. So right now I need to speak to the part of you that still feels angry. The part that says that, but they got away with it. And maybe they did. Maybe they never apologized. Maybe they never changed. And maybe they never even saw the damage. But listen carefully. Your healing cannot depend on another person becoming who they should have been. Because if your freedom requires their transformation, you will remain emotionally chained to them for the rest of your life with no chance of freedom. The moment your healing depends on someone else, your power leaves with them. Some of you have spent years waiting for closure, waiting for validation, waiting for acknowledgement, waiting for an apology. And I understand that pain deeply. I've experienced it. But closure is not always something you receive. Sometimes closure is something you decide. You decide, I will not carry this anymore. You decide, I refuse to let this define the rest of my life. You decide, the pain stops here. And let me tell you something powerful. The strongest people I know are not the people who avoided pain. They are the people who transformed pain into purpose. The people who took suffering and created empathy. The people who took rejection and created compassion. The people who took abandonment and became deeply present for others. Maybe your deepest wound is also your greatest doorway to purpose. Because people who understand pain deeply often love deep. People who have suffered deeply often see others deeply. And people who walk through darkness often become the light for others. Your pain may have introduced you to your purpose. So take a breath just for a moment. Seriously, pause and ask yourself honestly, what story have I been rehearsing for years? What identity have I unconsciously built? Who would I be without this narrative? Not without the memory, without the identity attached to the memory. Because maybe the next version of your life requires the depth of the death of the old story. And that can feel terrifying. But it also can feel free. You don't have to become someone else. You simply have to stop becoming smaller because of what happened. So let's close it. If you remember nothing else from today, remember this. You're not weak because you were wounded. You're not broken because you struggled. And you're not ruined because life hurt you. But you do have a responsibility now. A responsibility to stop feeding the story that keeps you trapped. A responsibility is to stop introducing yourself to yourself as a damaged version. A responsibility is to stop letting go the worst thing that happened to you. Become only the thing that defines you. So your responsibility is to stop letting the worst thing that ever happened to you become the only thing that defines you. You cannot heal in the same identity that was created inside the womb. Maybe this moment, maybe this episode, maybe you listen to years from now and say, that was the day I stopped living from my past. Not because the pain disappeared, but because you changed your relationship to it. And hear me, that is radical responsibility, not blame, not power, not shame, freedom. The story can be changed. You can change. Your life can change, but only when you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, who do I choose to become now? Thank you for being here. Thank you for being willing to face yourself honestly. And remember, your inner advocate is waiting for you to finally believe that your future deserves more power than your past. I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Your Inner Advocate, a podcast by Kimon Peterson, formerly Conversations with Kimon. If you found value in today's episode, please follow, like, and share the podcast with someone who you think may benefit from it. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and connect on Instagram at your_inner_advocate. Until next time, keep listening to and developing your inner advocate.